Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into one of history's absolute most dramatic narratives, a story of rebellion, betrayal, and some really severe consequences. Pulled right from the pages of Exodus 32, the story of the golden calf is way more than just an ancient myth. It's a profound, unflinching look at human nature under intense pressure. As you'll see, it exposes exactly how quickly fear can unravel a society and what it truly costs to lead people who have completely lost their way. So let's anchor our story in a really highly charged central tension. What actually happens to a community when their leader just vanishes? Today, we're going to explore our human intolerance for uncertainty. We'll see how pure anxiety, brewing in the total absence of Moses and a sudden vacuum of authority, turns into absolute panic, and ultimately how that panic sets the stage for a monumental betrayal of trust. Let's start with Section 1, the catalyst. This timeline maps out a terrifying psychological shift. Step 1, Moses goes up the mountain and days just keep passing. And as time drags on, that silence from the mountain starts to curdle. It goes from awe and reverence into this feeling of total abandonment. The source text specifically points out that Moses delayed to come down. That gap in time, it breeds unchecked panic. By step 3, the people hit a breaking point. They demand immediate action, officially kicking off the rebellion. You can practically hear the desperate urgency in their voices when they approach Aaron. They declare they simply do not know what has become of this Moses. Feeling entirely abandoned out there in a brutal wilderness, they crave something tangible, something they can actually see and cling to. So they demand Aaron to make us gods who shall go before us. Notice what's happening there. They aren't just asking for a new human leader to step in for Moses. They are demanding entirely new gods to lead them. It's a shockingly fast descent into idolatry. Moving right along to Section 2, forging the golden calf. Now, what's truly striking about this next phase is Aaron. The man left in charge represents a complete and total failure of leadership here. He doesn't push back against the panicked mob, he doesn't plead for patience or remind them of their promises. Instead, he actively organizes their rebellion. He tells them to hand over their gold jewelry, and then he deliberately fashions it with a graving tool to make a cast metal calf. And he goes even further, cementing the betrayal by building an altar and formally declaring a feast for the very next day. So the next morning rolls around, and the people get up early to offer sacrifices, to eat, drink, and party. And they make this staggering declaration. They say, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." I mean, think about the immense tragic irony of that moment for a second. They are entirely attributing the parting of the Red Sea and their miraculous liberation from the world's greatest superpower to a piece of melted jewelry that they literally fashioned just the night before. Crazy, right? This brings us to Section 3, Moses intercedes. Meanwhile, high above the chaotic partying down in the camp, a very different, incredibly intense conversation is unfolding up on the mountain. God informs Moses that the people have corrupted themselves incredibly quickly. God's wrath is burning hot against what he calls this stiff-necked people. And right here, we hit a massive turning point and a profound test of character. God essentially offers to wipe the slate completely clean. He says he'll consume the Israelites and make Moses the new Abraham, building a great nation entirely out of him. For an exhausted, frustrated leader, you have to imagine that was a staggering temptation. But Moses doesn't take the deal. He immediately steps in to intercede, and honestly, he delivers an absolute masterclass in negotiation. First, he appeals to God's reputation on the world stage. He asks, why should the enemy, the Egyptians, be allowed to say God maliciously led his people out just to slaughter them in the mountains? Second, he reminds God of the binding, legal nature of his ancient oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. He stands directly in the gap. And because of this fervent, bold appeal, God relents. Let's look at Section 4, the climax and the broken tablets. The narrative builds to an intense physical climax as Moses finally heads down the mountain carrying the 2 sacred tablets written by God. On the way down, he runs into Joshua, and there's this fascinating auditory contrast. Joshua, the military man, hears the wild noise from the camp and thinks, it's a war. But Moses, the spiritual leader, he corrects him. He knows that's not the sound of military victory or defeat. He recognizes exactly what it is, the unmistakable, undisciplined sound of chaotic pagan revelry. The sheer reality of the betrayal hits Moses the second he nears the camp and sees the golden calf and the dancing with his own 2 eyes. His anger burns hot. In a powerful, dramatic motion, he throws those divinely crafted tablets right out of his hands, shattering them at the foot of the mountain. And look, Moses isn't just throwing a tantrum here. He's physically acting out a devastating reality. Israel had already shattered the sacred covenant written on those stones. Moses is absolutely furious, and that fury drives him to completely humiliate this false god. He doesn't just tip the idol over. Actually, he systematically eradicates it in 4 very deliberate steps. He burns it with fire, grinds it to powder, scatters that powder on the water, and then literally forces the people of Israel to drink it. He totally demystifies the idol. He reduces it to mere dust and makes the rebellious camp literally swallow the bitter consequences of their own sin. Then Moses turns his fierce attention to Aaron, and the contrast between Aaron's excuses and reality is just staggering. Aaron immediately tries to pass the buck, claiming the people are just prone to evil. Then he offers what has to be one of the weakest, almost comical excuses in history. He basically says, well, I just threw the gold into the fire and boom, out came this calf. But we know the reality from the text, right? Aaron deliberately and intentionally fashioned that idol with his own hands. Okay, Section 5, Retribution and Aftermath. The narrative takes a very dark turn here. Moses realizes the camp has entirely broken loose, and order has to be violently restored. The dancing has stopped, the idol is destroyed in the drinking water. Moses stands at the gate of the camp and issues an ultimatum that's going to determine life or deaths. He draws a literal line in the sand and shouts, "Who is on the Lord's side? Come to me." It is the ultimate tension-filled test to see exactly who remains loyal while their society falls apart around them. The sons of Levi rally to Moses, but the directive they receive is unyielding, and honestly, it's brutal. Moses commands them, in the name of the Lord, to strap on their swords, go gate to gate throughout the entire camp, and strike down the rebels. Think about the horrifying cost of this purge. To restore order, these men had to turn their weapons against their own brothers, companions, and neighbors who refused to stand down. The consequence is immediate, and it is stark. As the text states, that very day, about 3,000 men fell by the sword. Linger on the gravity of that number for just a second. 3,000 dead in a single afternoon. The purge was swift and devastating, a direct fatal result of a total breakdown in leadership and a massive lapse in loyalty. The next day, in the grim, silent aftermath, Moses tells the survivors they have sinned a great sin. He returns to the Lord to try and make atonement, and this is where we really see his true character arc. Just contrast Moses with Aaron for a moment. Aaron caved to the mob to save himself. Moses offers to damn himself to save the mob from God. He begs for their forgiveness, offering his own existence to literally be blotted out of God's book entirely if the people cannot be spared. Our explainer reaches a highly complex resolution here. God rejects Moses' offer to be a substitute, declaring that whoever sinned will be the one blotted out. Moses is ordered to keep leading the surviving people onward, and a divine angel will go before them. But the tension doesn't just vanish. The chapter ends by noting that God sent a plague upon the people because of the calf they made. Yes, they survive, but the text makes it crystal clear their actions have lasting, painful consequences. So as we wrap things up today, we're left to ponder a really difficult question. Can a community ever truly recover its unity and trust after such a fundamental betrayal? The ancient history recorded in Exodus 32 leaves us wrestling with the heavy complexities of leadership, the utter fragility of loyalty, and the deep, lasting scars of rebellion. It's a lot to think about. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and I'll catch you next time.